I started collecting rocks when I was 5.5. I was taken against my will from South St. Louis to northern Jefferson County. There was nothing there except rocks and my little brother. The rocks were more entertaining. And have been collecting rocks literally that long, and I'm 68 now. About halfway through the trip, when I was about 40, it was part of a massive layoff, when they were doing all these corporate buyouts. So instead of just going and jumping in and getting another job, I took a couple of years off and I went back and I got a degree in geology from Mizzou. And I went to Mizzou because they only required 2 semesters of calculus, not 4. On the other hand, I also have a degree in writing, and what I've spent my whole life doing is programs like this and writing articles on geology. There are many people out there who are geological engineers who are much, much smarter than I am, but I can translate geology into English. And so that's what I've been doing. And welcome, and glad to see so many people show up. I know about half of you, the other half come up and say hi. If you've been in Pacific at all or driven by, you notice these big white cliffs that we have everywhere. And that's what the topic is tonight, to the wide Pacific shore. And if you don't remember anything else I say all night, just remember that the cliffs in Pacific are a 450 million year old beach sand. And it's like sand dunes. And they were buried and they turned to rock, kind of, sort of. None of it ever made anything near like rock, like granite. And it is also a resource. It's pretty, but it's also a resource that is quite useful, because without silica sand you would have no glass. You would all live in houses with shutters, and you couldn't, you wouldn't have a patio door. It would be, the inside would be very dark. So that's the take home, is that the beach is in the Pacific, which is kind of cute, since this obviously is the Pacific Ocean. And what I'm going to talk to you tonight is about the beach. Just a little basic introduction to the history and this is going to be more geologic history in the second half and more geology in the front, but please stay awake. It's not going to be boring, and it's going to be a whole lot better than Geo 101 if you ever had to take that in college, just to get your credits right. Geology affects everything we do, and it's kind of sad that they don't teach it in high school anymore. If I were, if I was education czar for the day, I would force schools to teach a semester class in geologic hazards. And if they did that, people would not build in floodplains. They would not put their houses on sinkholes. They would not we were up in Washington, we saw $400,000 houses being put on the ash from Mount St. Helens. But something as basic as where are you going to live, geology affects it. And the other thing is, if you talk to anybody who has any degree in geology, they will always tell you, if it can't be grown, it must be mined. And you can mine things well, you can mine them very badly. And unfortunately, doing it badly is cheap. So that's the reason a lot of people who are into the environment say, oh, I don't like geologists, as they drive up in their vehicle made out of metal with lead or lithium batteries.
And glass windows.
Yes. Anyway, just very briefly, the geology in Missouri is right here. This is like Johnson shut-ins and elephant rocks. This is the igneous part. This is where we did have at one point have volcanoes. We did have explosive calderas. We had a landscape much like Yellowstone. The orange around that is a mix of sandstone and limestone. The bright blue is mostly limestone, and I'm assuming that you all are familiar at least to know what granite and limestone and sandstone are. I'm not going to go into that. He asked me later if you have a question. And the teal colored, this is the Missouri Plains, is kind of interesting. It's a thing called a speleothem, where there's like a 2 foot section of coal, and then there's 2 feet of limestone, and 2 feet of clay, and 2 feet of sandstone. And this repeats. Excuse me?
Cyclothem. You said speleothem.
Okay, cyclothems. My husband is right. We're talking to somebody about caves earlier. But those are stacked up like 20 to 25 deep. And if you've ever been in North Missouri, it's pretty flat. And the last one, well, the last two is, you see the yellow. Yellow traces the rivers and the boot heel. This is what's called alluvium. There really aren't rocks there. Or the rocks are sand and gravel, but there's no hard rock. And a little bit that's green, that actually is young enough to have been into the Cretaceous 70 million years ago, and that's the only place Missouri dinosaurs come from. So we cover pretty much 1.5 billion years of geology. What we're going to concentrate on tonight, this is just starts at the top with the oldest, goes to the bottom with the youngest. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the Ordovician, which is this area that's 450 to 475 million years ago. And we have no Silurian here, we have no Devonian. These are geologic time periods, and they are, you can tell one from the other by the kind of rocks that are exposed at the surface, the kind of rocks that were laid down. Because in Missouri, you've only got 3 kinds of rocks. You've got igneous rocks, volcanic rocks, you've got sedimentary rocks, and the sedimentary rocks, which are basically it's little grains made from eroded away, washed to the ocean, piles up, heats up, and forms rock. And the third kind is metamorphic, and we don't have any of that around here on the surface. This is the landscape of Pacific, and none of you, or very few of you, perhaps 1 or 2, have ever been to that big lake that's up in the northeast corner. That is a sand plant, and that is U.S. silica, and they are one of our big businesses in town, and they actually helped me a little bit with this presentation. I needed some help kind of fact-checking some of the more recent stuff, and they were very kind to give me some time and some information to clear up what was going on. Okay, we're back to the Big Missouri, and again, geology is the bones beneath the Earth's surface. Well, what kind of bones do we have around here? And I'm not talking fossils. You see the red? Just kind of look at a strip of red here. That is the St. Peter sandstone. And it's called the crystal escarpment. It goes all the way from down around Cape Girardeau. If you come up I-55, you drive through a lot of the sand, and then it comes up, it crosses the Missouri River right here at where the Merrimack, the Merrimack drainage is on this side. You go up to Gray Summit, and the other side of Gray Summit is Missouri drainage. So it crosses the river right here, and it goes out kind of to mid-Missouri where it pinches out, and you just don't see it anymore. It goes underground. this kind of speaks for itself, that on the left side, this is an example of a Missouri stratigraphic column. The rocks at the bottom of the screen are the oldest, the ones at the top are the youngest. The St. Peter is right here. And this is basically the geology of the town. And I'm sorry it's all pink, but I looked to find some kind of a map without drawing one myself that was kind of useful. Any place you see STP, it's not the car additive, it's the St. Peter. And there's I-44, there's Osage, and this vertical line is the county line. And if you've gone out 44, you've seen right here. This is McDonald's right here. But if you get on the exit there and then you go west, you go through the St. Pete there as you're driving up to Gray Summit. This is the Midtown. This is near the sand plant. This is also Blackburn Park. Blackburn Park is the remains of one hellacious sand deposit that they called Prospect Hill, they called it Sand Hill, they called it Sand Mountain, and now it's a city park. And there's the Red Cedar Inn where we're sitting, which is like right here. Right up there, this is JP, that's Jensen's Point. And if you've ever been up to Jensen's Point, you looked away from the river, and you're looking right down into the U.S. silica plant. I mean, there's a fence back there. You're not going to slide off into it, but it's, you can literally just look into the sand mine from up there.
Can you go up there?
To the top of Jensen Point?
Yes.
Yes. Since 2015, it also has been a city park. And then it was acquired. And we have Wayne Winchester, who owned it, to thank for that. And Steve Myers, who did a lot of behind-the-scenes engineering. And then he got a grant, and then the city helped with some. And then Red Cedar was vacant. The city got Red Cedar. The building in between was Wayne Winchester's office. And because of the fact that we had, we've got city property here, we got city property there, it's like, oh yeah, well, we're going to do this. And, it's still pretty new, and there's still all kinds of contention going, but in 25 years, this is going to be one of the coolest things that's really going to bring people to Pacific. Okay. Well, I mentioned that we had the sedimentary rock that was laid down was because there were, it washed out to the ocean. And the sand mines here, all of the area in blue that's covered there. That was part of the Tippecanoe Sea. And it was an Ordovician Sea. It was about 200 to 300 feet deep. Most of the seas around here were not that deep. That's the reason we don't call them oceans. But the shore is where the St. Peter sandstone was laid down. That's an actual picture what the little sand grains look like. And the way they can tell that it was a beach sand is because if you've got a sand that's just washed, just get out of the river. It's angular. It's not broken up. It's a whole bunch of different colors. But a beach sand gets blown around. And as it gets blown around, a lot of the things that are softer get squashed up and blow away. Quartz is not soft. Quartz is a very silicon dioxide. It's a very persistent mineral. And these deposits here, almost everything is in excess of 98.8% just silica sand. Anybody in this room can crush silica sand. And I've never tried to have a program with actual silica sand and a microphone, so for a little bit here, you're just going to have to deal with me talking loudly. Certainly. You're welcome to come up after the program and actually look at this stuff. And we have, see the picture of the rocks in the box? That's these. And these are silica sand nodules. They're hard, they're more cemented than most of the stuff that is mined here. These are free. If you want one or two, you can take them. If you want to go mine your own, when you go south out of town and you come up from the river and you go on Highway F and you go through a cut before you come down the other side, and that's where I picked every one of these up from. So, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to get out there and play in traffic. You can tell, you know, those are pretty hard, right? Well, the museum here has got a sandbox back in the kids' area, and I was going, oh, I got to worry about the sand here. Yeah. But it's like they got sand all over this place to begin with. This stuff is very, very, what they call friable, which means you see the little rainstorm I'm generating here. As I said, I'm 68 years old. Look, I can break rocks with my bare hands.
How many days would it take you to rub that thing down
To an oven, I don't know. I don't get that bored. But anyway, I'll show you the other rocks and some up. These are a couple, and they're just pieces of the silica sand. They're not quite as clean. That actually came out of a bluff. This came out of the ground. And another one. You know, they're sparkly. They're pretty cool. And in fact, these are harder than that big piece. And later on in the talk, I'm going to say two things. One about patina, and the other about iron oxide as a cement. Well, you see how the outside of this rock is all brown? The inside is kind of orange. Well, I got 2 for 1 in this one. This time I got a piece that has the patina on it. And this just means that after a lot of wind and rain, the outside of the rock gets case hardened. And once you get it broken, the inside is still real, right. But even though this looks like it's, you know, full of iron, which it is, if I took this and I set it in a bucket of water for, 2 or 3 days, the iron will wash out. And then you will also get the white sand. You'll also get the white sand like that. Anyway, afterwards, like I said, you're free to come up and get one of the little nodules. I've got handouts. With the handouts, I didn't bring enough, and I didn't know how many people were coming. But I've also got business cards there, and a little tablet. So if you leave me an email, I can email you copies of the handout sheets. And I will not do anything with them other than that. Whenever I get them emailed out, comes off my computer, goes in the trash. So, the people around here are hunters and fishermen. They heard about the Pacific Palisades. They think it's this conservation area and boat ramp. It's actually this. You see, like that white bathtub ring, all around the Merrimack. This is at that outcrop at the top of Highway F. And that is called a palisade. A lot of people, when I got out here, they kept telling me about caves. Well, Eugene and I are cavers, and we're not, this is not a cave. These are all old, mined out sand mine pillars. And there may be a few caves around here, but mostly somebody says cave in Pacific, they're talking about the old sand mines. Okay. This is just a kind of a flip by through. If you want to go see some sand that you really can't dig and you really can't take home, but anyway, it's still kind of cool. John Robert, these are all made out of St. Peter silica sand. Most of these are out Highway FF. Don Robinson is off the sand. It's off the Sand Cut Road off of Highway NN. Believe this or not, when I was a teenager, I had a girlfriend that lived over there, and the road was sand. It wasn't paved, and it wasn't dirt. It was the sand. Out to the west end of where it's exposed, there's the Grand Cave State Park, which is it's a fantastic 10,000-year-old archaeological site. And there is an unfortunate reminder of our past. When they put Highway 70 in, this is out in Montgomery County, they literally made the highway around Slave Rock. And this is a rock where, yes, black people were auctioned as slaves during the 1840s and 1850s. Just north of here, you got to go up through Warrenton and then go east on 94. This is another sandstone mine called Klondike Park. When you look at that, you think it looks like snow, and that's the reason they called the sand mine, which one was mined, they called it Klondike, because it was a brilliant white sand. Tavern Cave, this is on the Missouri River, the riverfront, and this is the one where Mary Lord Lewis was out exploring above the cave and almost met his end on the way west. He apparently saved himself by taking one of his big long knives and sticking it into the ground to keep himself from falling. Okay, now the part of this that is more history than geology. First of all, are there any geology questions?
We were just at Klondike Park, and I was going to ask you what that was.
Yep.
It was so white, I wondered, but I didn't know what it was.
It's actually a place where a lot of people go have their wedding pictures taken.
It used to be owned by this sand plant down here.
Right, right.
Is it?
You used the word Palisades earlier.
Yes,
I'm assuming that's how Pacific, the conservation ground, got its name.
yes.
But is that like the name of the sand color or something?
No, Palisade is the name of the formation. The fact that it's a sheer cliff down to a river, and I mean, we're talking 70 to 90 degrees, very, 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 very steep. But the geological term is called a palisade.
Okay.
So looking at that picture, since the sandstone is so friable, it's that limestone on top that keeps it from eroding away.
Yeah, you're going to see another picture of that a little bit later on. But what the gentleman was saying, this is Blackburn Park, and this is kind of the pride and joy of Pacific. It's been a park since the 1940s. It was part of the Henry Shaw Garden Way, and there was a family named Blackburn from, of all places, Webster Groves, who were on the Henry Shaw Garden Way Committee. And when someone was offered this as a city park for Pacific, they said, we'll pay 3/5 of what it cost. And it was $15,000. So they basically put in roughly, around about $9,000. And somebody said, well, hey, fine, we'll name it for these people from Webster Groves. And they did. Anyway, the sand, what's remaining, is like right here. And the next layer up that you see is up to about here. When you see where there's a little kind of long, the rock isn't very tiny up like it is up there. It's got good bedding. That's called the Joachim dolomite. And dolomite is just a limestone that's been reimmersed in the ocean. It picks up magnesium. It changes the chemistry, but it's a kissing cousin to limestone. And the very top up here is called the platinum limestone. Okay, this is going to be like an overview of whatever Joe could think of to tell you about sandstone in the St. Pete. The Indians used it. The Native Americans used it to put petroglyphs up. This is a little favorite, my favorite drawing out of Picture Cave, which is up in near Warrenton. The sandstone would take this probably carbon, kind of put into the wall, but it's been preserved in that case since about 900 AD. I said something about case hardening and a patina. Again, that wall had just naturally fell. This area here is what the patina, what that case hardening looks like. Okay. Early silica mining was done by hand. After the hard surface was broken, you get a shovel to scoop it up. If you wet it, you could wash out the cement. Eugene and I were actually on a cave gating project where we needed some concrete to put in the iron bars, and we just literally went and dug this stuff out of the nearby creek bank instead of hauling sand to the location. I'm not going to read you everything on the screen, but the railroad, which of course made Pacific when it was Franklin, the arrival of the railroad, also did wonders for the sand industry. I mean, they knew the sand was out here, and St. Louis was 32 miles away. So even if you wanted to sell it, it was going to be a pain in the wagon to get it there. Hey, we got a train. This is a picture of Blackburn Park, called Prospect Hill or Sand Mountain. And you see it was actually kind of sloped gently down to town. That's an early photograph and an early drawing. Where that cart is going is like right here. And this is, of course, at this point in time, it's above the town. There were at least two sand works that went here before the Civil War. They originally started mining it from the west side, and then someone went up about 2nd Street and Walnut Street, and they tried to mine in from the east side. And over time, there were at least a half a dozen companies at some point mine this thing. You'll have to look at some of the pictures in a little bit. The surface of the top of the hill is not where the top of the hill was. They removed a lot of the top of the hill, and they built houses out of it. Okay? And you see how high it was. It actually sloped down to about where St. Bridget's School is. So you figure out how much sand did they move out of here. And people are always excited about the Battle of Pacific. Well, in 1861, because of the railroad, it wasn't because of anything else, but because the Union forces wanted to protect the railroad, they brought in some good old boys from Iowa in order to protect the rail line. And the whole line of Sand Mountains, the whole north side of what's now 66, it was a great place because you can see forever up there. That was 1861. People, the South really did not do much in this area until 1864, And because of that, people got real lax, and nobody's gonna ever wanna come here. Well, when General Sterling Price made his famous last raid in the fall of 1864, they got to, this is from, it started out with the Battle of Pilot Knob, and then they went to Leesburg. And at one point, they were thinking they were going to go and take St. Louis. But mostly what their purpose was tearing up tracks, tearing up railroads, burning bridges, and just in general raising chaos with local population. They didn't even kill many people unless they were, they got in their way. Well, they burned the creek over they burned the bridge over Fox Creek to the east, and they occupied the top of Sand Mountain. The people came out from Jefferson Barracks, and it only took a couple hours by train, but then they had to march into town. And it's not so much that the Union had a decisive victory, it was like the South turned around and went home. Well, they didn't go home, they continued on their way west. Some went to Union, some went to Washington. They all met up again about in Jeff City. But it was 34 miles from Catawissa with 2 destroyed bridges, one on the Merrimack and one on Fox Creek. It took almost a year to get the railroad back out here. Now, if you ever research something like this is so cool. This is an old picture that was apparently done from a balloon, and it's a hand-drawn picture. And you can see the old sand mines. You'll also notice, if you're looking in the streets there, Osage does not exist. Which got me to thinking, how in the world, there's this wire road, which is the telegraph line from St. Louis to Springfield. And we know that it's the road that goes between the tracks in Eureka. But when it gets out here, it gets pretty much the sand mines on the south side, and it just disappears. So this is a side note, but I'm trying to find out what happened to, did the river take the road? I don't know.
No, the road was never there. When they were building Highway, was it 14 and turned into 66, the very first mayor of Pacific went up and talked to the highway people and got it to move from Highway 100 down here, and that was a brand new, they cut the hill back some more, and that was the brand new road.
That is true, Henry, but basically I'm saying coming from Eureka.
Wasn't that Franklin Road?
Oh,
It was Franklin
it
Road.
was Franklin, yeah.
Franklin Road basically peters out on the south side, though.
Right. It ran along the river,
Ran along the river.
and then it crossed the tracks.
Yeah.
Right about where Beacon Car Wash is, it crossed the tracks,
Well, the tracks
and then
were-
followed Union Street into town.
I thought that was all the way down by the prison, all the way to Eureka, went to St. Louis.
I don't know. It was Franklin on the south side of the tracks.
Right.
You can
So
go back.
you said it crossed out at
About
about the
where
Beacon?
So it
There's
ran,
a blacktop
yes.
there
So-
where it crossed.
So Franklin Road, it runs from Allenton, it goes between the tracks, and then
Right.
when it hits Fox Creek, it went east under the tracks, across Fox Creek, then out to Pacific along in front of the gun club and things,
Right.
and then it went along the river, and the river has taken what it used to be, where it went across along the river until about where Beacon Car Wash is, and then across the tracks, and then it took Union Street into town.
Okay.
There's still signs to the road. I went down
Yeah,
there
there's-
on a hike
there's
with
a
Steve
blacktop
Myers.
there,
Yeah, I know there's still signs of the road on the south side, but
Yeah.
I just wondered,
There's an old- there's an old
where it
bridge still
ended
there.
up. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Isn't that road down there that goes to Palisades, isn't that called Franklin's?
Yes, yes.
So that's.
It actually got a street sign right behind the plaza, where it cuts over, it says Franklin.
Right, but basically it cuts to Franklin, and that goes down to the river, but Franklin continues.
Well, went all the way
Right.
through Eureka, yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, there were an awful lot of companies that mine sand out here. This is not probably even a comprehensive list. And one of the problems in trying to do this sort of research is they really didn't have a business directory. Sometimes it was, 3 guys that got together and they bought a piece of property and started digging. And in fact, even working with people at US Silica, I got two or three different answers on that. But people seem to think that industrial scale sand mining started around 1880, and this was a incorporated company that employed 15 men. The way they would get their sand is they would take bottles of nitroglycerin and they would throw it against the cliff, and obviously it would explode, and then they would just dig the sand by hand. Everybody in this room recognizes that thing on the right. You know why it's green? Because that's a poor grade of glass. It's a poor grade of silica that has a lot of iron in it, and it's very cheap. People didn't want to look out green windows at their house. So we had lots of sand that did not have a lot of iron in it. These are from the Crystal City Underground, which is the old PPG mine in Crystal City. But this is the kind of mining that they did inside of the hills, inside of Sand Mountain, inside of what you can see just driving by down by Beacon. And it's called room and pillar mining. Somebody had said something, what would happen if something collapsed? Well, it did. In 1891, a couple of these drifts, these underground sand mines, crossed over each other. There was nothing supporting the roof anymore. This was around 2nd and Walnut Street. And it just went kaboom in the middle of the night, which was quite lucky because nobody was in there working. They didn't work 24/7 back there. But I put up this picture, took about 3 days ago. There's nothing holding up that Joachim and that platen up there. And this is right on Osage, right across from St. Bridget's.
It could go any time, huh?
If you had a really big earthquake, I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on it holding. I just keep running into pictures of Blackburn Park, Sand Mountain, Sand Hill, whatever. So, what do? They're in all different shapes and sizes and permutations. We nearly can figure out, this was from 1917. And this is the corner of one of the roofs on 1st Street. And near as we can tell, it was probably taken from the 2nd floor of the Daily Building, the McHugh Daily Building. And more pictures. This one's got some little guys on a bicycle. If you have lived around here for any time at all, you know every Christmas they put the little nativity scene up there into the side of the hill. And even if you're not Christian, even if, it's just kind of a cool thing they've been doing this since 1952. Anyway, the picture you see up there is a mine chip. When a miner goes into, especially an underground mine, they give him a chip, which is hanging on the wall at the shop. And when he comes back, he has to put that chip back up there, or else they come looking for him. These are some of the St. Louis area 19th century glassworks. And because the sand itself was not expensive, what was expensive was the labor and transportation. So if you could sell your sand to somebody in St. Louis instead of somebody in Pittsburgh, you're all around, everybody's going to win. I remember as a kid, my grandparents actually had a little farm at the top of 141 Hill, right across from where 141 crosses 44. And I remember going into Valley Park and seeing the remnants of this old glassworks. and was kind of astonished to find out that they really didn't demolish it entirely until 2002 when it basically got flooded in the 1915 flood. And that was the end of the business. Okay. These are a bunch of old pictures that came out of the 1918 Missouri Geological Survey Sand and Gravel Resources Report. And what I've done is they're in order, but I've color-coded them to where in town they are. This is roughly over where the beacon is. This is, sort of close, but not exactly on Highway 00. This is Sand Mountain. This is actually the back part of Sand Mountain, and this is a sand mine, a quarry that was out of Gray Summit. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about most of these, but it's just that same order of places. These are pictures of what it looked like, both the quarry and their works. Gentleman mentioned the Klondike mine. That's a picture of them when they were mining out of Klondike. Tavern Rock Sand Company actually advertised themselves up here on top of Sand Mountain. And you can see there's a whole nother layer of rock up there that's gone. What's the sign look like? Pacific Glass Sand, the people who ship a lot of their stuff into Valley Park. It's roughly where the East Dollar General is. And Glazer's Quarry was the back end of Sand Mountain. The White Sand Company at Gray Summit, it was pretty much just one deposit that was white, and it was entirely surrounded by rock like that piece of the iron ore, iron cemented stuff. So they were kind of landlocked. This is Osage. This,
That's before the railroad.
that's before the, no, it's not before the
Oh,
railroad.
there's ties right there.
I know, but the tie thing, the guy who was doing ties, it was in the late 1800s. There was a lot of tie hacking that went around in this area. And the telegraph poles, the railroad is actually over to the left. The fellow started out as a railroad tie hacker, and he made enough money that he bought this area right where the beacon is, and he mined his sand there. When Route 66 came through, the route that they did, that forced him to move around the corner, and he mined that whole large prominence. Now this is kind of exciting because I'm still not certain what it is, the order. I've gotten one order through going through the old papers as to when Pioneer Silica started, how it got to be Pennsylvania glass sand, and then how it got to be U.S. silica. And I've actually seen 2 or 3 different ways, but there's no way you have to go through the newspapers. You have to go through old people's papers. And that's what the whole point of being a historian and doing history and saving stuff is. Whoever clipped this, I just want to kill him because it's a really nice clip. There's no date on it, and there's no newspaper name. So I have no idea, other than by type style, it's 60s or 70s, maybe early 80s, but I wish I knew.
It's out of the
Maybe somebody
transfer.
can identify that pickup truck. Maybe that pickup truck is.
Well, like I said, it's kind of fun, and I encourage you, if you're interested in this, go dig in yourself, because it's every time you dig, you turn over a rock and there's something else. for a while during the 1990s, the U.S. Silica was very active with the chamber here. And that's where they had a really, really long article in the Tri-County Journal on that. This is important, and that is, in here in Pacific was the first place that someone, the workmen, sued their employer because they were all getting white lung or silicosis, which is a really nasty disease, very similar to black lung. Your lungs fill up with this white stuff, and it's, or asbestos, you know, people that get cancer from asbestos. They actually won a lawsuit, and a number of them, like 30 people who won lawsuits in order to get better health regulations at their workplace. And finally, by the 1920s, you know, we've been shipping sand all around the world ever since about 1850. Finally, someone says, well, why don't we bring some manufacturing here and make something out of this sand before we ship it out of town? And this is the Missouri Hardstone Brick Company. And again, that's right there where the industrial park is now. There's a lot of technical specifications up there, but there's some reason that the sand brick is cheap, but it doesn't endure as well as a clay brick. But you had to make the sand brick to find this out. It's an old picture of the Royal Theatre, which was made entirely out of this stuff. And they tell me that there's some of the sand brick in this building down like around the foundation. And, you know, we got this really nice new Mexican restaurant called Camilla's at the old Royal Theatre. They painted over all of the brick.
Oh, you're kidding.
And luckily I had taken these pictures about 2000.
So many kids scratch their names on those bricks over years waiting for the sugar.
Well, you know, I actually am old enough that I went to a show there. But that's what the brown tile and the silica brick looked like. And it's still there, but it's buried under paint.
That's where I first saw true grit, John.
I had being a geologist, we've got a organization called the Association of Missouri Geologists. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Crystal City and to be sitting on a school bus watching them blow up one of these walls. And we were far enough away from the, you know, from the mine. It wasn't like we were sitting right on the edge or anything. But it's another really big kaboom. This is a list of things that silica sand is used for besides just glass. It'd be pretty boring if everything we do is we make glass out of it. They're actually, I was told when I went on a tour of the plant at one point, late 90s, that there actually was some of the ceramic made from silica here that was put into the heat shields in the space shuttle. So, and the one thing that I always like to tell people, because they, you know, oh well, you know, they'll get silicosis, you'll get this. Silica sand is FDA approved. It is used as a non-caking agent, meaning if you use manufactured sugar or salt, there's a little bit of silica sand in there to keep it from clumping. So, you know, probably everybody in here has made a little bit of silica sand